Hi there, and welcome to this week's edition of Beauty's Career Insight. So, as always, please do let us know where you are joining from. Today I'm joined by David and Trevor, who have both been on before. We had a session a couple of months ago about how to get sales when you're self-employed. So today is kind of following on from that, but you don't have to have seen that one to enjoy what we're going to be talking about today. So it's really a bit about retaining customers, managing customers when you're in that kind of self-employment capacity. So, hi, David, Trevor.
Hello.
Hi.
And as always, please do like and ask any questions, make any comments as we go through the sessions. So, as I said last time, we talked a bit about concerns around getting customers, etc. So we'll put a link to that session in the comments for this one later. But in the meantime, we'll get started, which is all about how do you encourage repeat business. So Trevor, I think you were going to start with this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way, it's an art form, but in another way, it's a science as well. Because in terms of, if you think back, I'd ask people to sort of think back to when they won a client. For example, if you've won clients and you're at that point now, where you think about all the good things you did at that time, that you met them, you impressed them with your efficiency, you followed up, you put in a proposal quickly, you won the business, and you're working on the project. And then I think that's the stuff that a lot of people do. And because, this is about how do you encourage repeat business. I think what happens is a lot of people stop at that point, and they go and do the project and they don't think much beyond the project. And then they get to the end of the project and then they say, oh, is there anything else? And, oh, no, we haven't really thought about that. You've just done a project. There are other ways of doing this. There are more steps in the cycle you could use about sort of, keeping in contact, not just about the project that you're working on, but also asking a lot of questions, listening to what the client's kind of underlying sort of problems and issues, and thinking on two levels, if you like, during a project. The task at hand and new business opportunities that you should be creating. So you should be thinking about that as you're going along, so that it shouldn't be a surprise to the client that actually there might be another project in the offing, and you've got an inside track. Because you've had those kind of you've had those conversations with the client, and it may be that something comes of it, something doesn't come of it, but either way, you've put yourself in the best possible position to make it seem natural to the client to carry on working with you on something else.
Excellent, thank you. And David, I think there were kind of 4 points that you had that sort of fed into what Trevor's just been saying.
Yeah, what Trevor said just prompted a fifth one, but it's very quick.
Okay, excellent.
It's a bit like the old Monty Python sketch, if you remember, when you're going through the reasons. I think the first one, which links very closely to what Trevor just said, is that philosophically, it helps if you can consider, once you've won an assignment, that you're effectively being paid to do your future marketing. Without overdoing it, it's just something to kind of bear in mind. The second thing, particularly if you're providing a service, is it really helps if you can create a scenario where your client sees you as a business partner and not a vendor, because that's a completely different dynamic, and that's going to lead to them kind of sharing things with you that possibly go beyond the assignment you're on. So that's a good one to think about. The third one is, because of where you are in this privileged position, provided you don't abuse it, you can start anticipating what the client's going to need next, rather than just reacting to what they need now, as you get to know them better. And I said not to abuse that, but just to be aware of it. Fourth thing I've seen work quite well is when the assignment's coming to an end, as you're doing like the final kind of debrief and sign off, that's the moment when your client is going to be at their happiest, hopefully, because you've done a good job for them. And that's the perfect time to say to them, can you think of anybody else, having been through this, that might benefit from what I do? Because they won't necessarily think about that. So you might get some warm leads, which would be brilliant, because that's much easier than having to go out cold. But also, it might reinforce in their mind why they hired you in the first place, which might increase the percentage likelihood that you do get further business. And then the final one, if there is nothing immediately forthcoming, a lot of it's down to timing and opportunism. See if you can come up with a way of keeping them warm without being an irritation. So something I've done, which has worked quite well, is if I can think of one of my clients where I will do work. I've been doing work with them for 20 years, but I'm not in their office all time over the 20 years. There are gaps. And one of the things I do, if I see an article or something similar that I think is relevant to them, I'll email it to the founder of this business and say, "Hi, Mark, saw this and thought of you." And the impact can be significantly more than the effort it takes me to do that. So those would be my 5 tips to kind of encourage repeat business.
And it's that point about sharing is fantastic, because I've very often found that my best leads have come from moments where I'm not actually trying to get more business, where I am actually just sharing something, and they may come back and say, "Oh yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about something," and they but it was kind of on their muddling around in the middle of their priority list, but they're just thinking, well, here's the opportunity to talk to Trevor, or talk to David, and so there's that side of things. I think when we're talking about those conversations that you have within the client relationship, where you're sort of keeping one eye on the project and one eye on the future, there's lots of sort of open questions you can sort of ask in terms of not just listening to what's important and real to the client. So you ask those questions like, "Tell me about so and so," if they're saying we've got a real problem with this, and ask them about the context or the business scenario. And so to go into those kind of open-ended things where you're just getting them to, so they can't answer yes or no, they have to actually sort of expand a bit. And because you are you're helping out and hopefully doing a good job, they do tend to open up and talk about these things. And you don't necessarily say, "Oh, well, I've got the perfect solution for you," sort of straight off. You certainly don't do that. But then just go away, gestate it, and then when the time's right, it might be something that you might want to suggest or have another conversation about.
Excellent. I think as well, it's worth just going back to people you've not heard from for a while as well, isn't it? So I've certainly had people that sort of career coaching capacity, but I've not heard from them for a while. So I'll go back to them and they'll say, "Oh, I'm really glad you got in touch, because I've been a bit embarrassed that I've not been back to you." And you can't, they kind of feel bad because they've left it so long. So actually that could end up giving you a bit of work as well, I think.
Yeah.
People do forget things, don't they? So okay, so we talked quite a lot last time about networking, but is there different advice for networking when it's your own business rather than, say, when you're job hunting? So, David, do you want to start on that one?
Okay, thanks, Sarah. This time I think there's 3 things. You'll be relieved to know there's not 5. The first one, and this is a very common mistake I've seen over the last 20 years when people come out of the corporate and institutional world and set up their own business, is they get to learn about networking events, some of which could be sort of formal through sort of chambers of commerce, through people like the Institute of Directors and so on, some of which may be more opportunistic at trade fairs and conferences and so on. And they rub their hands with glee thinking, "Great, I can go off and shoot fish in a barrel." And it really doesn't work that way, because networking is about building relationships. It's not about selling. And if you try and sell, you'll get pushback, because the other party isn't necessarily ready, because there's a time and a place. So the most typically you can achieve in a networking type environment is to tee up a follow-up meeting with the other party so you can find out more about them and their business. And that is already in terms of the sales process, that's a big step in the right direction. So that should very much be your name. Be your aim rather. I remember being part of a networking group down in Sussex where there was a lady who, she got the equivalent of a networking ASBO, because she used to come along to meetings and just really kind of railroad people, almost trying to get them into submission. And eventually she was warned that, this is not the way things are done. And she didn't heed the warning. So her membership was terminated. And she was told she was no longer welcome, because you could actually see if she came in the room, groups of people would go into closed circles so she couldn't join. And that's because she didn't understand how networking works. Fascinating observation on human behavior. The second one, I think, is being very clear on your identity and purpose, because that's what you will be living out when you're in these networking environments. And very, very closely linked to that is that in terms of your branding, whatever you say and do is kind of coherent and consistent. And again, I've come across people where when I've met them in person, there is a disconnect between the carbon-based life form in front of me and what I've seen on their LinkedIn profile, on their website, on Twitter, wherever it may be. And quite often, you don't have to be kind of Hercule Poirot to figure out they're talking a better fight than they can live up to. So I think that consistency of words and actions is so important.
The thing I would add, that integrity of the personal and the brand is crucial. I mean, there's an old quote from a guy called Albert Hubbard from the 19th century, which was, never many a man's character would not recognize his reputation if he met it on the street. And I think that's quite sort of telling, that what your genuine character is has to be, congruent with your reputation. Otherwise people will just inevitably be disappointed if there isn't some sort of congruence on that. I would say that, I mean, by the way, I would say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm in a 1080 forum, but some of the 1080 guys are just the best at applying what networking means, whether that's for job hunting or whether that's running your own business, because the whole philosophy around that is about giving in networking. And actually networking is a whole heap more fun as well. That applies to when you run your own business as well. I mean, it's not just something for if you're looking for something like a job or anything like that, but just a general post that if you're interested in what people are saying and you're trying to help them in some way, it comes back in spades. It comes back in so many in multiples. And I'd say that when you are doing networking sort of as a business, you have to sort of be very clear on your identity, what you're there to do, and the difference that you make, and to show your knowledge of the market. And that is what will sell for you. That is not, you don't sell by saying I've got the perfect answer for you. You will sell by just talking about your knowledge of the market. And people think, well, I don't have a need right now, but if I do, I'm going to go to that person. And they're the person that can help me. And you're more likely to stick in people's minds that way than the example that David gave, where everybody just closed the circle whenever the lady approached.
Absolutely. And I think the networking is not selling is such a good point, and I think it's really evident on LinkedIn as well. So the number of invites that I get from people, and I can just tell from their headline they're going to start selling straight away. And if I do accept, I will then invariably get a message within minutes saying I can help you increase your coaching business, or this, that, or the other. Actually, I don't want to be sold to in that way, so I'll probably then just disconnect.
I don't know many people who want to be sold to in that way.
Exactly.
I mean, so I don't know why it's done so much. I think it's done because
how can it work, possibly?
It's kind of putting an impersonal layer over something that is just should really be sort of personal and not sort of grabbing, if you like. It should be much more about giving. So
I heard someone say on a I think it was a session on Clubhouse a while ago when it was someone that's in sales, and he said something like, you need to have at least 10 interactions before you even start talking about selling. I don't know if that's a well-known stat or if that's something he made up. I don't know. David, have you heard that before?
I've heard different numbers put to it, 6 or 7. The other thing which picks up on what Trevor said is that there is a quite well-known phrase in the networking game called giver's gain, and that is that if you do something for somebody else, they will be more minded and motivated to do something for you. Because it could well be that you're having a conversation with somebody and they need help, which is not your area of expertise, but you might know somebody who can help them. They will remember that, and then they might come back to you or introduce somebody else to you that they know who might need help. So you've got that first stage of removal. So the giver's gain principle is quite important as well.
That's really important. The kind of the connection one step on is that somebody thinks, I really want to help this guy, but or you explain your story, you're very clear on the thing. But if you can explain what you do in simple terms, then they can explain it in simple terms. Someone else, so it's very clear, what difference you make. Because I mean, how many of us kind of get lost in a fog where we're trying to say, I met this person, and I didn't quite understand what they do, but they're very good, and you should speak to them. But then that won't happen. But if you're very clear about, here's David, he does, he has this impact, he makes this difference, then you're much more likely to get the call.
Yeah. And I think the point that you made as well about being really, really very clear on your kind of your purpose and your brand is really important. I remember when I first set up 18 years ago now, someone said to me, just take any piece of work that you get. Doesn't matter if you can do it or not, because you'll work it out. And I'm not sure that was the best idea. Yeah. So yeah, maybe that works for some people, but it doesn't establish you as an expert, does it? That's the thing.
And I think when you are kind of describing what you do, it's really important to avoid kind of initials and jargon. Otherwise, you might just see their eyes blinking in terms of what on earth this person on about. And I'll tell you a true story of personal humiliation. I was at a networking event where we were all regulars. It was every week as a breakfast. And one week, the chair decided to have some fun. And we all had to throw our business cards into a basket. And you had to take one out. If it was your own, you put it back. If it was somebody else's, you had to deliver their elevator pitch.
Oh.
Okay.
And it was proof of whether, A, you'd been paying attention, and also whether they'd been saying something that you could understand. And the guy that picked mine out, he had a franchise. It was a contract cleaning business. And he picked up my card, and I'll have to clean up the language a little bit. And he went, "Oh dear." He said, "It's the bloke over there." That would be me. He said, "Blowed if I know what he does." He said, "I think it's something to do with helicopters." And the only thing he picked up from my elevator pitch that I'd said one of the benefits of working with me was that I could help them get a helicopter view of their own business and see what it really looked like as opposed to what they thought it looked like.
Right.
And the only thing that created an image in his head was the word helicopter.
Yeah.
So it's really worth testing your elevator pitch on other people, and by their feedback, figuring out whether you're hitting the spot or not.
Okay. I thought you were going to say, and that's how I learned to become a helicopter pilot.
But yeah, I was humbled in public, so I had to I had to completely rewrite it.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of coming up with someone else's elevator pitch, though. I think that's quite interesting, trying to work out how I can get that into a session somewhere.
It's a good test. A good test.
Okay, so next question. So what about when you've got too much work, so too much business coming in? How are you going to deal with that? So Trevor, do you want to start with that one?
Do you know what? I mean, we focus so much on, I think a lot of the worry and paranoia about things is about getting too little work. But I think this is a much more common and a much more difficult problem to deal with. So it's great to be talking about it. Now, just imagine you're in that situation where you've listened to this talk and others, and you've got all this repeat business sort of coming in, and so suddenly you're spending all your time on client work, and you will have heard people say this is exactly the moment when you should be marketing for you. But doesn't that feel very hard because you're actually spending all your time focusing on the client, and you're not really sort of looking beyond the immediate horizon. And it's the most difficult challenge because typically for solopreneurs or very small businesses, they find various excuses to prevent them dealing with the problem. So they've got too much work on their plate. They're too busy. They're working more hours. They're getting more and more tired. And they make these excuses. They say, I can't find anyone who can do it like me. Now, no, they can't. There's a certain amount of truth in that. But if you're running a sort of a business that's got one type of structure where you are, where you haven't invested the amount of time to establish an enterprise rather than an individual business, that's going to be true because the business is kind of constructed around you. So that is a kind of signal, if you like, that you need to be bringing in more resource. And you may do that to start with by automating some things you do, outsourcing various things you do. You might then find you still have too much work, and then you have to sort of more and more outsource some of the things that perhaps you are core to what you do, but making sure it's not imprinted with your personal imprint, but with an enterprise imprint. Second thing excuse people make is that I can't afford good people. Now, I would say that this kind of, I call it an excuse that is where people haven't invested, where business owners haven't invested the time to create a kind of a proper business model where you're, in terms of customers, pricing, sales volume, where you can actually bring someone in to actually fund that. And you'll find that actually there are certain tasks that you could more than afford that, because the time it frees up for that valuable going out and getting more work is invaluable in that place. And then there's the issue about training people. People say, well, maybe I can find someone, and maybe I can afford them, but have I got time to train them? And I'd say you haven't got time. You can't afford not to train them. you've got to bring people in and invest the time. And just at the moment where every bone in your body is screaming at you, got to get the client work done, got to get the client work done, that is actually the time when you probably need to put an upper limit on the client work that you do. Even turn away work. There's nothing wrong with turning away work, by the way, because it means that you can start to pick and choose and about the type of work and actually have a more strategic view of what you want to do. And that means you could perhaps raise your price, take on better quality projects, and at the same time you're bringing in people who can help sustain you in that area. So I'd say the answer is about scaling up your improving your use of time and scaling up your team. And that's what you do when you've got too much work. But it's the hardest thing, because every instinct is telling you that I've got to serve the client, and you should be serving the client, but you should also be realistic that you don't have 58 hours a day, to do things.
Yeah, and there's lots of things like virtual assistants, for instance. So if you don't want to employ someone or have that kind of regular outgoing because you don't know how it's going to work, then you could do something like that. Get a virtual assistant for a while, see how it goes, and like you say, you'll notice very quickly that it's helping you massively.
It's about empowering, instead of waking up and saying, what can I do to be successful or to get more work, or to, is to actually say, what do I need to do today to empower the team that I'm building to be more successful? And you'll actually find, paradoxically, that you then actually you don't feel like you've got too much work, and you have the scale to go out and get better work.
Brilliant. So, David, I'm sure you've got a list that you've been working on.
David's always got a list.
You'd be disappointed if I hadn't. I think the first thing for me is the fact that there are two big transitions people tend to go through. The first one is creating the business in the first place, which is already a huge change. The second one, when they prove themselves in the market, the model works, is kind of scaling it up or growing it. And one of the key things that's going to determine that is whether the founder sees the business as a lifestyle business or a value business. Now, if it's a lifestyle, or if I do it the other way around, if it's a value business, then in theory, you're building something which at some stage, somebody would find it sufficiently attractive that they would want to buy it. So that could then top up your pension or whatever. But if some of the profit, you're not taking all the profit out, you're reinvesting some of it in building the business, creating software, processes, models, methodologies, toolkits, whatever it may be. That's great. Somebody else may want to buy that at some point. But if you just see it as something that's funding your lifestyle, then on the day you decide to stop, it stops, because there'll be nothing there that anybody else will want to buy. And that will underpin a lot of people's thinking as to this whole thing about kind of scaling up. So I think that's the first point. The second, an exercise I did, which my mentor encouraged me to do, which worked quite well. Somebody called it a dead time audit, which was a great name. And you just create an Excel spreadsheet. You don't need anything funky. You pick 7 days. You do it from 6 a.m. until midnight, and you break it into 15-minute components, and you color code it based on what it is. So marketing, selling, delivering, admin, travel, sleep, whatever it may be. And then at the end of the 7 days, you look back on it, and I'll guarantee you get a surprise. First time I did it, the big surprise was how much of my time I was wasting traveling, which was unremunerated. And I had a virtual PA with a sense of humor. So I'd have a meeting in the West End, then a meeting in the city, then another meeting in the West End. So you got this dead time in between these meetings that you could put to better use. So the key decision then was, in terms of working smarter, not harder, I designate different days, a West End day or a city day, and then just cluster the meetings that way to the extent I could. Made a huge difference. But then it also triggers, do I need a virtual PA? Do I need a book? How much time am I spending on bookkeeping and invoicing? Do I need a bookkeeper who can do the invoicing as well? And one by one, you bring these people in. And as your business is growing, you're in a better position in terms of pay as you go to kind of fund that.
I actually do that, by the way. I do what you're saying. I mean, it was just somebody said to me, if you color code from new business, marketing, client work, and it's been revelatory, because not only is it prettier, but it's actually, you really do suddenly go, oh my God, that's how I'm spending my time. So I've come from it from a different angle, but I totally endorse what you're saying there.
Yeah. And then, that's on the infrastructure side. Then on the delivery side, there may be things you're doing where you can do them, but there's people out there who can do that aspect better. So finding them, building a rapport with them, seeing that you kind of share the same values, the same code of conduct, and so on. So you need to do some due diligence, but then you can actually strengthen your proposition to the marketplace.
Yeah. I think that there's also I think that, I was talking about those excuses that people use. If you're talking about scaling up to create value in the business, where people say, well, people can't do it like me. And I think sometimes the underlying fear might be, I'm worried that people can do it like me. And that, and then absolutely. What do I do? And what do I do then? And the answer is you get them in to help you so you can get on with spending your time on developing the business, which is, how you would then grow it and be more successful still.
Excellent. All really good points. So we have had a question through. It is more about what we talked about in the last session, but as we're okay with time, I'll put that anyway. Okay. So great thoughts. What would be your advice for the startups? How should they present themselves in the networking events when the product or service is not yet live or in the conceptualization stage? So I know, David, you talked about this quite a lot last time, didn't you?
I was trying to remember what I said.
So I think the first thing was about, okay, so you've got this idea, but does the market actually need it? So that was one of the things, wasn't it?
Well, I think, the thing is, I think before you start presenting yourself, talking about your product or service, that you've done your own stress test on your idea and made sure that you're a solution to a problem rather than a solution that's got to go find a problem. That helps your self-confidence and your self-belief when you are talking about it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong in saying I'm in development phase or I'm not launching till Q1 next year or whatever it may be. Because people will see through you if you're trying to present it as something that's going when it's not. So total honesty is really, really important. And one of the things I've seen work quite well, rather than discount your price to win business, which is really dangerous because that's then the expectation, that's your going rate. So in terms of price integrity, you're not doing yourself any favors. But something I've seen done very well in the States, less so over here, is people have these early adopter promotion. So for the first 10, if say whatever the rate for your service is, let's say it's £1,000, just to keep the math simple. If you said for the first 10 clients who sign up, I'll do it for £400, but I would be hoping that if you're happy with what I've done, you'll give me a testimonial, post something on social media, whatever it may be. And in the States, they gobble that up, but you're already managing expectations. That's for a limited time, and your real commercial rate is 2.5 times that.
Yeah,
I think certainly in those situations, I think it's fine to do a sort of introductory offer. I think the point about price, though, and staying reasonably firm on your price is a very important one. And you think about the alternative. If you reduce your price at an early stage, you're seen as a bit soft on price, but you're also spending. If a job is taking a certain amount of time, then you're doing it for less money, and therefore you have to work longer hours in order to make up the shortfall elsewhere, and you're spending less time then actually going out to the networking events and picking up more business. So you'll be starting to chase your tail if you are not firm on price. You can be firm on price, but maybe soft on the amount of time that you spend on a particular project.
If you can trade time, not money, that's great.
Yeah,
and the other thing is,
exactly. Yeah.
If you haven't got the price point right, then the other party might question whether you're actually any good.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is when you're at a networking event and your product or service is not live, is that you could be actually saying, just describing what you're trying to do, but also asking those questions of the person that you're talking to. Does this sound like the sort of not without being pains to say I'm not in a position to sell anything to you, I'm not trying to, but I'm just interested is, do you have a need in your organization? And the best intelligence is often when they say no, they don't, because it'll save you a lot of time.
If you say you're in research mode, they're more likely to disclose things that are useful to you because you're less of a threat at that moment in time.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So we are pretty much out of time now. So top tip or final thought to leave with. So Trevor, do you want to go first?
In terms of repeat business, I would say it comes down to the mindset that you have. You have a client, you're working on a project with them. My top tip is even when they are a client, even if they've been a client for a while, never treat them as just a client. Think of them as the project you're working on. You're giving your best shot on whatever they're asking you to do. But you have to be slightly schizophrenic. You have to sort of be thinking about that, but also thinking 3 or 4 months ahead, about what they may be wanting, anticipating needs. So my tip is not be schizophrenic, but my tip is have one eye on the now and one eye on the future, and that will serve you well in terms of getting repeat business if you think ahead.
Okay, brilliant. And David?
From me, I think it's all around trust. If you buy into the idea of trying to grow the business, then in terms of who that means you will need to bring into the team to make that happen, that there is a very mutual kind of healthy respect, but also trust. So it's well worthwhile doing some due diligence rather than just leaping in enthusiastically and then finding that you have been taken advantage of one way or another.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for all your advice and suggestions. It's been a really interesting session. Next week, I'm back again with David again, so you get to see David again next week. And we're joined by Jeffrey Milton, who is someone who quite regularly comments on these. So he's one of our old clients, and we're going to be talking about securing different kinds of work. So looking at things that David referenced earlier, I think a bit about the psychological contract and changing tact as you're a bit more experienced in the workplace. So looking forward to that one. So thanks again and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.